Interesting story about Michael Santos. You know, again, in the world of philanthropy, I'm fortunate to travel to different places up and down the state to find these amazing organizations and individuals. I actually met Michael in 2009 when I went to go visit my best friend who was incarcerated at the Taft Correctional Facility in the Central Valley. And he introduced me to, quote unquote, his mentor, this amazing human being who had been serving 20 plus years and who on any given day was really creating a new pathway, not just for himself, but for hundreds and thousands of people that had come across those bars. And so it's interesting that, again, on the personal side of this work, I met this incredible human being who then created his own organization. And we're one of his, actually, we were the first supporter of the Michael G. Santos Foundation. And so this is a great thrill for me because I've gotten to know him very well. The man has some serious passion. I get emails from him at 3, 4 in the morning, and he asked me, what you been doing this morning? And so I'm already 3, 4 hours behind schedule. I think he runs 10 miles a day. I remember when he was incarcerated, he had a running blog, and I think by the time he was finished, it was in the thousands. And again, the guy's an incredible human being, but really changing the lives of many. And so without further ado, please welcome to the stage Mr. Michael Santos.
Julio, what an honor. I want to thank all of you for giving me this extraordinary honor. 60 days ago, I was just released from federal prison after 9,500 consecutive days. And I want to say that my return to society has been different from what anybody would expect. It's different because 26 years ago, when I began serving that sentence, it was as if I had the vision of what we heard earlier today expressed so eloquently by these amazing speakers and their amazing mentor who spoke about seeing what you can become rather than what society says you can become. I was an at-risk kid, made every bad decision a young man could make. My father escaped from Cuba, came to the United States with hopes of building a better family, of having a son who brought him pride and joy. And I disappointed him and humiliated my family because I was influenced by another fictional Cuban-American who was Tony Montana, influenced millions of people across the great United States. And I was one of them who believed that in this country, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the woman. Okay, so we see that that really didn't work out so well for me, okay? Because when I was in my early 20s, after a reckless transition between a reckless youth and a transition into an adulthood that was misdirected, I lacked the character that we saw in here and these speakers here, and we heard from so many others. And I was sucked into the world of drug trafficking through nobody's fault but my own, and got arrested on August 11th, 1987, continued to hear this message that I am going to beat this case. And that's all I cared about. That's all I cared about was beating the case and getting out of jail. It wasn't until I was convicted 9 months later or 6 months later in jail that I recognized what a horrific decision I had made. That I recognized the enormous disappointment and humiliation that I had caused to my community, to my family, to everybody. And I didn't know what to do. I was in jail. I was in the system of corrections looking for some type of guidance, but unfortunately I couldn't find it. Maybe it was because I was blind. Maybe it was because I didn't know how to ask. And so I did what many people do when we face struggle. I prayed. I asked God for guidance. And through those prayers, I was led to a book that I never would have expected, a philosophy book. At that time in my life, I didn't know how to spell philosophy. But I'm flipping through the pages, and I come across the story of a man who's facing a death sentence, Socrates. Now, Socrates is facing a death sentence not for the types of bad decisions that I made, but because he believed that in his society, every individual had a chance to grow. Every individual had a chance to contribute and develop meaning in their life. And Socrates had an opportunity to escape his punishment. But instead of taking that opportunity, he said, no, I live in this country of Greece, the bedrock of democracy. And in this country, I have the right to try and change laws, but I don't have the right to break laws. And so when I heard that story, I remember still putting the book down and just thinking, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to find some kind of way to reconcile with society, to create meaning in my life and make some sense of whatever's going to come. I knew there was no hope of me getting out of prison early. I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That is the way that our system responds to young people who make bad decisions. We believe in this warehousing system of human beings. We've refused to look at what the individual can become. But I found a different message in this story of Socrates. And I thought back and I said, I'm going to reject these external pressures. I'm going to reject this message that I cannot become something more. But how do you do it? And so you're sitting in a jail cell and you feel the pressure. The walls are closing. You're facing life. At that time, I don't know what I'm going to get. But I remember envisioning myself on a stage, just like this. I remember envisioning standing before distinguished members of this audience. Last night, I met the chief of police of Santa Rosa. I've spoken with the chief's probation officers for counties, and they don't look at me for the coke I sold when I was a reckless kid. They look at me for how I transitioned. And it was that vision that I had 26 years ago that made that possible. So I remember saying there, how am I going to get to that position where I am someday, something different from the bad decisions of my past? How am I going to get there? And so I thought, well, is there anything I can do? Anything I can do while I'm in this cell? And I thought, yeah, I think there is. What is it? Number one, I could work toward educating myself. That's what society would expect me to do. Number two, society would expect me to contribute to society, to demonstrate my 100% commitment to wanting to reconcile with society. And it would expect me to build a support network that would have a vested interest in my coming back to society whole. And if I could do that, I believed that possibly people would look at me differently from the bad decisions of my youth. And it was that principled approach that got me through the journey. We spoke about the journey earlier. It was that principled approach that said, this is how I'm going to tune out the pressure of the gangs. This is how I'm going to tune out the pressure of a message that reverberates through every prison in the United States, which is, you've got nothing coming. I had to find a way to tune out that message. And so while I'm continuing through the criminal justice process, I am sentenced. And I'm facing life without the possibility of parole. And I made this statement to the judge. I wrote a long letter. I said, I know nothing's going to change. I said, I just hope that perhaps someday you will have an opportunity to look at me, not for the bad decisions I made as a 20-year-old, but the way I responded while I was in circumstances that some might construe as adverse. Now I'm not so sure, because when I heard these young people speak today, I recognize, wow, I had it easy. And I just articulated that to the judge and everybody, and I want to tell you what the prosecutor said back then. After I made that statement, this commitment to say, I want to change, I want to reconcile, I want to do something good, I want to try and earn my freedom. And I'll never forget this sentence, because what the prosecutor said was, if Michael Santos lives to be 300 years old, and if he spends every day of his life in an all-consuming effort to repay society, our community will still be at a net loss. And that was okay. You have to own what you did. And I tried to own what I did. And then the judge banged his hammer down, and he said, you're going to get 45 years. And I've sentenced for it. I said, okay. And I was locked in chains and transitioned from my home in Seattle, where I had a support network, to 2,500 miles away to the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta. At the time, the New York Times said it was the most violent penitentiary in the United States. And so I walked through my share of puddles of blood, and I dealt with the Bloods and with the Crips and with the Emme and with everybody else. But I had something that I was blessed with, and that was that message from Socrates. That was that message that says, you can become something more than your environment. And so I looked for this same type of message from others, and I found it in the words of Gandhi, to try and become the change that you want to see in the world. I saw the path through Malcolm X. I saw the path through Mandela. And these are the people who inspired me to say, you've got to find a way to sustain the level of energy and discipline that's necessary to overcome struggle. Because struggle, really, I started to recognize this was just my struggle. But we are all human beings. And we all face struggle in one way or another. And the challenge is to overcome it. And that's what I said, this is what's going to derive, that's how I'm going to derive meaning in my life. To find a way to communicate a message so that other people can overcome struggle. Because the prison system, and I don't mean any disrespect to those who devote their careers. If you're in this room, I know that you're a true believer and you want to see change. But if you're living in prison, it seems and feels as if it is exquisitely designed to extinguish hope. And we don't hear the message that we heard here today. We don't hear the message that I heard from that mentor who so wisely spoke and said, don't focus on the past or what society is saying you can become. Focus on the best. And that's all I focused on. That led me through to earn an undergraduate degree through my early term and a graduate degree. And I was in a PhD program at the University of Connecticut until the warden said, well, this isn't a college. We don't want you getting this degree. And he put a stop to it. And the way that he put a stop to it after I finished my first term was they controlled the mailroom. And he said, I don't know if you're bringing drugs in here when these books are when the university is sending these books in. I'm going to put a stop to it. No more books for you from the University of Connecticut. That effectively put an end to my formal education. And for a while, I remember asking him, I said, you know, I've been in jail for 8 years. I've got my master's. I mean, come on, I'm really serious. He said, no, it's not going to happen. I said, you know, I want you to know something. You are doing more for me today by denying me. I was already admitted into the PhD program. I finished first term. By denying me, you're allowing me to show the world why this commitment to mass incarceration is the greatest social injustice of our time. And I want to say that I was as ready then as I ever would have been to be released from prison and return to society as a law-abiding, contributing citizen. But 8 years wasn't enough. Justice required its pound of flesh, and it was immovable and intractable. And if it wasn't for leaders like the ARC group, like the people I see who have been so instrumental in reversing this legislative change that I heard about today, and forgive me for being a little bit ignorant on the legislative law of SB 9, I think in 260, it's because I just got out of jail 260 days ago. But I want to talk a little bit about that. Because with that type of legislation and the courageous people who stood up and funded that type of legislation and fought for that type of legislation, it would not have happened if people in this room didn't come together. This is, if you believe that this is really the greatest social injustice of our time, then we all have a role to play. And I worked with Sammy Nunez in Stockton. I've met Jaron Jordan from the First 50 in Stockton. And I'm trying to connect with as many people as I can because I know that we all have a role to play. When I got out of prison 60 days ago, I didn't come back. My vision was always, I want to be able to put a suit and tie on, and nobody will ever know I've been in prison unless I tell them. But this is my life. This will be my life. This is my passion, as Julio said. I worked for it through each of the 9,500 days to help people in prison change their life. But I can tell you something. It is a heavy lift. It is a heavy lift because there is such a profound message of failure, of you've got nothing coming. And because this mechanism doesn't exist, that now does, because of SB 260, that somebody has a reason to change their life. They're people who are so vested in, they're so easily influenced by the gangs and by the hard thing. And it is hard to do what this young man from UCLA did, to sustain the energy and the discipline for decades. And that's what we sentence our kids to. That's what we sentence our adults to. And so what do we need to change that? Because not everybody is so blessed to have found the work of Socrates. Instead, they hear the message that all you need to survive in this world is a ball of hate in your stomach and a knife. Now, in 26 years, I never had a weapon. And I can tell you, I never had a single problem in prison. The real reason that I didn't have a problem in prison is because I had this vision. I had this message. I had this passion to come out differently from what anybody said, from how anybody said I could come out. And that's my job today, to connect with all of you courageous nonprofits who are out there in the street doing the heavy lifting, who are organizing hundreds and thousands of people. My job is to show them as a tool for you. Through the work that my good friend Justin Paperny has done in organizing, it's not my foundation. I am blessed that he put my name on that foundation, but the reality is this is Justin's foundation, and it's Julio's work that has made it possible for me to come out and live this vision. But I've got to connect. I've got to connect with law enforcement. I've got to connect with other nonprofits. I've got to connect with schools. And more importantly, I've got to connect with employers. You see, I came out and I had enormous opportunities when I came out. I had opportunities to work in a number of different businesses that I could have earned a great living, but I told them, you know, I'm not only driven by money. I am 50 years old, and I consider this the greatest social injustice of our time, and I can't just, those aren't just platitudes and words for me. This is a passion for me, and it's something I want to contribute to changing. It will bring some relevance to my life. And so I told him, I said, listen, I need to help reduce violence. I need to help heal this problem. And he looked at me and he said, you know, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because I want you to know nobody gives a damn about anybody who's come out of prison. And this guy's employs 500 people. His business does several $100 million in revenue. He's a CEO, and he's my friend. And he's telling me, come work with me. I tell him, you know, I really think I've only been out for a little while. I wasn't even out of prison yet. I was still in the, I had the wonderful boot of corrections pressing down on my neck. And I tell you, I need to try. I need to try. We've got some traction. We can try. I've published some books. I've got some connections in academia. I think I can make something work. And so he said, I'll give you a year. And we persuaded him to allow us to try and hire people. He said, if you can get people to come out of prison like you've come out, I'll change our policy and hire them. So I said, wow, that's, you know, the problem is the system is designed to receive. I said, in order for me to do that, I've got to start reaching them when they go into the prison system. And how am I going to do that? And so we decided to create this program, this video-based program, that we could teach inside of institutions and possibly to people who've come out and are on probation. I said, if I can create this program, maybe I can give it to or work with other nonprofits and distribute it and have other facilitators teaching it so that these guys have the tools to listen to these stories, because these stories are absent in the prison. You know, the guy who gets a single cell in prison isn't the one who's putting himself through college. It's the guy who can use a knife and who will respond to any type of perceived disrespect with violence. We've got to start sowing these seeds from the start, from the earliest times like these people are, but everybody has a role in this. This is a team effort. And I cannot be the quarterback or the running back for anybody else. But what I can be is a tackle or a guard that opens a hole, shows a vision, and lets a guy run through himself. But he's got to be able to see himself as something more than what society says he can become. Not an $8 an hour worker. But a man like this young man over there, and forgive me, I think it's Gilbert, I forgot his name, who's now studying at Harvard. You know, a man like these people and young women that came up here today and spoke about how they can become so much more than what society expected of them. Until we start sowing the seeds of showing this message and how they did it, we are going to continue to fail. And so Jess and I are working right now. We really hope that you will reach out to us, that we can contribute to your organizations, because I've heard, I certainly know about the extraordinary work that fathers and families do. I've worked with, had the privilege, David Mohammed, I've had the privilege of meeting him and spending time with him, and he's in our program. He's a story for us. He is a story for us because he is exactly what every person can do if they have the commitment, if they can follow this principled path. Our principled path is called the Straight A Guide. I'd love to say that I created it myself. I mean, it's really wonderful to say the Straight A Guide, but that wouldn't be true. To paraphrase, great Californian Steve Jobs, good artists copy ideas, but great artists steal ideas. And in creating the Straight A Guide, all I did was steal ideas from leaders like everybody in this room. I'm going to tell you how it works. I'll give you a bullet point list. Number one, you got to define your values. If we can show somebody, as these people spoke before today, define yourselves not by what society says you are, but what you want to become, you're on the path. That's the first step. Define success. Number two, we've got to set clearly defined goals. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but when I communicate it, when it comes from somebody who did a quarter century, sometimes the message gets through to these people. So, values and goals are the essence of our program. And that's when we advance into the Straight A Guide. Straight A Guide, we say it begins with attitude. You got to have a 100% commitment to rejecting a criminal lifestyle, to rejecting criminal associations, to rejecting gangs, and saying, I want to be a leader like David Mohammed. I want to be a leader who's transformed my life and become something more than what society says I can become. When we communicate that message, we can define whether somebody has truly a 100% attitude to success. The second prong in our Straight A Guide is an aspiration. I am who I am today because 26 years ago I saw myself on this stage talking to leaders like you. The third A in our Straight A Guide is action. Everybody knows that an overnight success story is a 20-year journey. I really emphasize the importance of a 5-year plan. Don't get out and try to be Sammy Nunez. You got to get out and sow the seeds. Be willing to take that entry-level job, but educate yourself. Have the vision to become something more. Learn the skills to network. The fourth A in our Straight A Guide is accountability. We've got to demonstrate with clearly defined timelines whether we succeeded or failed. And if we failed, it's okay, as long as we own our decisions. And the fifth A is magnificent because it has two prongs. It's awareness. Because I was on this path, I was aware of opportunities that were available to anybody. But because I was on this discipline, I could seize them. Simultaneously, the world became aware of me. Julio told you, as being one example, he became aware of me while I was in prison. But I had numerous mentors. I studied criminology and sociology. I studied the work of Professor Barry Crisberg, who I know is here in this audience tonight. I remember somebody, it was before him, a guy named Norval Morris, who became a great mentor of mine, who wrote extensively about the prison system. And he wrote that we need to change our prison system so that an individual can rise to his highest potential, whether it's a janitor or a plastic surgeon. His past should not dictate his future. So, awareness was the fifth prong of our template for success. The sixth was achievement, to celebrate every achievement. And the seventh was appreciation, to express gratitude to everybody who's made this journey possible. And so I want to just close up here and transition into the next phase of our project, where I'm going to be questioned by Celeste or Julio. And I just want to say, I want to express my undying gratitude to each of you for giving me this extraordinary privilege of being able to stand, because I heard so many people who were so much more qualified than I am to deliver this keynote, and I'm humbled that Julio gave me this honor. I thank you. I thank the California Wellness Foundation for supporting our work, and I want to say to each of you, thank you for the extraordinary work you do in sowing seeds of hope. If I can be of service to you, please reach out. I am, as Julio said, my workday begins very early. It ends very late. I'm teaching right now at San Francisco State University a course on the architecture of incarceration, telling the story about why mass incarceration is today's slavery. It's an intergenerational problem, and we need to solve it. Everybody has a role. If I can be of help to any of you, please reach out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Very honored. Thank you.